Manav Sethi. Happy to be on the WebEngage podcast.
Hi, Manav.
Good to hear that WebEngage teams are healthy, safe, and happy.
Thank you.
So basically, if you look at last 40, 45 days, right, this entire pandemic that has arisen out of nowhere, I think there are few industries that has been severely hit, whereas there are few of such verticals where we've seen incremental consumption,
Mhm.
right? Whether there is online gaming, whether there is online entertainment, online commerce in essential categories, online health, etc., have seen, a renewed priority, and largely because of the constraints that today India as a country is going through, right? So I'll sort of talk about OTT play.
Sure.
I think what we have seen in the recent past is an uptick in the conversion, right? In terms of consumption, in terms of watch time, in terms of people interacting, engaging, consuming shows that possibly they didn't, have time to watch earlier
Mhm.
or discover earlier.
Mhm.
I think this is also the time where we as a team have, thankfully, because of the Martech stack that we used, have also seen a lot of efforts and inputs on the retention, side of the thing, right? Because customer acquisition is one part, and today, the channel breadth that you otherwise enjoy, right, and the media mix that you otherwise enjoy, the times that we are in, you only have as much, platforms where the consumptions are happening. So
Right.
I think from a marketer standpoint, it is much relevant to focus on from a customer life cycle management standpoint and see how much you can do on the retention side. And we've seen some very healthy conversion matrices on the retention side as well, right?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Entertainment is again one such category where we have been witnessing a structural shift from TV or linear
Right.
sort of consumption models to OTT models. We have in fact seen on the TV side a upswing, when Doordarshan sort of decided to bring back old
Right.
shows like Doordarshan or Bharata, which is again one kind of PG, but the kind of PG that has, sort of tasted blood in tasting consumption on OTT apps. I think that is something which this last, 40, 45 days
Mhm.
presented as an opportunity. All of us who are, in some way, whether we are consumer or marketers or stakeholders, have been hearing and talking a lot about content discovery on the OTT platforms, right? From
Okay.
a marketer standpoint, in a normal day when you are launching 2 shows a month, your velocity of creative content, consumer comms, and media comms is such that you are focused largely on the new show launches, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But today you can actually step back and say, what are those hidden gems? What are those shows that people had not discovered, or people started to watch and didn't finish, right? So we have sort of invested in efforts where we are going back to the consumer saying, hey, you watched 2 episodes of this show or 8 episodes of the season 1, and this is the climax waiting for you, right? And from a consumer standpoint also, it is today the life allows you, right,
Mhm.
to discover those hidden gems which in a normal course of life you didn't have time because of your busy schedule for the day. And it is also again a push from the supply side, because no new content is coming on board unless those platforms where you already have finished content in place and you are now taking it live, right? So it is something which is impacting from both the sides, but lucky we are that the nature of the business that we are in, we've seen a upswing. And
True. True.
people that I've spoken to in my peer group in the industry, we hear that there is upswing on education platforms, on health platforms, on essentials as a category in
Mhm.
e-commerce side. I mean, the other day I was hearing Mr. Sodhi from Amul talking about that how milk and milk products have been in huge demand, and thankfully from the supply side, the states have helped and ensured that the last mile access is there, right? So I think this period has brought in again, speaking from a marketer standpoint, it'll be stupid to, stop marketing efforts in all shape and form. I think this is a time to be both defensive as well as, play your right curves. Because, right, these are the times which will bring about the patterns, the consumer shift, the consumer cohorts that
Right.
possibly never existed before.
Very
And this
unique.
is where it
Sure.
is imperative for a marketing team to really look at or keep continuing to look at the data that the platform and the ecosystem at large is presenting back, right? Because it is not that you will, if I look at it from a general e-commerce standpoint and having done e-commerce in the past, right, I can say that you may not buy the premium shampoo that you used to use because that may not be, available right now, right? But at the end of the day, your shampoo, soaps, your daily groceries is something that you would continue to buy, right? So from a brand standpoint, right, there is no merit in sort of talking to your TG when you don't have access or distribution enabled, right? And which is why from a merchandising standpoint, a platform which would otherwise not, sort of bring at fore low margin, high volume products, right? Today, they have no choice but to talk about those. So whether you look at Big Basket, whether you look at Amazon, whether you look at Flipkart, or, whether you look at any such consumer platform, they're talking about staple stuff. They're talking about essential as a category, right? And I think that's the key insight, right? And you also asked me that how does it look like on the other side of it, right? So I think I haven't yet met anyone who has a definitive reply to that. And my belief is on the basis of whatever I know and whatever is out in the open, that I think as far as the normal is concerned, once we have a $1 vaccine available at your neighborhood store, that's when you're looking at normalcy to come back, right? And once normalcy come back, you would see consumption upswings to happen, because at the end of the day, I would go back using the same shampoo or soap that I was using, provided that is available to me.
Absolutely.
One. Second, now how far is that? No one knows. Anybody's guess, right? But if you hear again the efforts which are happening in India, Israel, US, and UK, you realize that it should be anywhere about 2 to 3 quarters from now, right? And that is where I think the sort of comeback would also look like. In terms of marketing spend, media mix, I mean, we have already seen that print has taken a huge hit because print circulation sort of completely cut down, right? TV has taken a hit because from a CNS standpoint, there are no more new episodes, no more new shows coming in, right? From a OTT platform which banked heavily on sports, right? Because IPL got delayed, so I'm sure they would also be relooking at their strategy. But their silver lining is that they got Disney Plus launched, right? And if you look at the numbers again are very, very healthy, numbers. So that was a pretty smart thing to do, if you ask me, right? So
awesome.
Yeah, that's that.
Brilliant. All great points, Manav. I'm going to pick on a few of those insights that you have shared. I'm glad that you mentioned that you guys are seeing a lot of traffic, upsurge in traffic right now. I'm very happy to hear that, of course. And in the early messages that we are also getting from the community is that a few industries have been hit very hard. Few of them, like travel, of course, are of course trying to identify ways to remain relevant and of course monetize right now. But a few industries at the same time are doing very well. And EdTech is one of them. OTT is one of them, of course. Now, I wanted to understand from an OTT perspective, since you mentioned that you are seeing an uptick as upsurge in traffic right now. Are you witnessing a new and different user base coming onto your platform?
Yeah, so I think we have been one of exceptions in that sort, right? Because if you have a Bollywood movie, so we have about 12,000 plus movies on the platform, apart from a few originals, few quickies, and a few other formats, right? So Bollywood movies are across the genre, right? So we have been lucky in that sense that we didn't have a homogeneous consumption form, either from the geography standpoint or from the socioeconomic standpoint or from the language standpoint, right? So in last 45, 50 days, we have seen an uptick across all kinds of consumer cohorts, right? But the largest growth is again from the B and C class towns, right? Of course, we've seen some upswings in certain content formats on metros as well, but the largest, uptick is from non-metro cities for sure. But again, this is across the languages, across the social strata, across the age groups.
Awesome, awesome. So considering that demand is at an all-time high right now, consumption has increased in unprecedented ways. I'm pretty sure nobody would have expected such a massive rise to happen. Of course, uh, has that affected the way in which you guys are going after your marketing strategy? Has it evolved as well?
Yeah, of course, right? And I touched upon briefly in early part of the conversation, right? That our efforts largely are not as much on new customer acquisition as it is on the customer life cycle once you have the customer on the platform, right? So in
Interesting.
terms of the conversion, sending mailers, notifications, your predictive analysis, your recommendation algorithm. So we have, sort of thankfully we invested in those web engage, kind of stacks where we are now going back to the consumer comms a lot more, and we are seeing a very, very healthy, conversion on that. So the largest set of focus is on retention rather than acquisition.
Brilliant, brilliant. Which brings me to my next question, of course. The biggest cut that most businesses have seen has been on the marketing side. Uh, the first budget to get axed was, of course, marketing, because everybody wanted to say that, you know what, longevity is the most important. We have to extend runway. Uh, Marketing budget needs to be slashed immediately. And traditionally, an acquisition strategy has been favored by most businesses as a great growth vehicle, but that has always been very expensive. Now that the funds are not so readily available, people are now slowly looking back to retention as the ready growth vehicle for most brands. So, what do you think right now is the most effective retention strategy that brands can put in place right now, both from an OTT perspective and in general as well?
So I think any such platform which has acquired scalable, consumption prior to being hit by COVID, I'm sure would have invested in MarTech stack in automating the customer life cycle, right? So both on the CRM side, CLM side, as well as the loyalty side, right? To that extent, I think today there is nothing extraordinary that you need to do from a retention program standpoint. The whole idea is that earlier you were grappled with this notion that how often do you want to go back to your consumer, right? Today you have his mind share, you have his time share, which was a scarcity earlier, right? So I think it is a lot more, in terms of how creatively you go back to him, in what shape and form you go back to him. We have seen some, I mean, earlier we would do, let's say, only one notification every 3 days or every alternate day, right? We're now doing one every 2 days, right? And we are seeing significant conversion from that. Our mailer strategy are showing uptake in terms of the conversions and people coming back and consuming, right? Our mailers on, recommending new shows, are people engaging with the new shows, watching the trailers and watching the content. I think if you look at even Netflix also, right? I've been watching that last 2-3 days, all YouTube mastheads are owned by Netflix, right? So there's at least one entity which is investing heavily on acquisition and awareness as well. And that this is the right time to really acquire that mind share and time share from a brand standpoint. So there is nothing extraordinary that you need to do. My only submit would be that you need to continue to focus on emerging cohorts, right? And see how those cohorts are shaping up. You got to segment it right. Maybe there were certain segments that didn't exist earlier, which exist now. For example, in e-commerce side, we spoke about
Essentials is a category.
essentials, right? Which may be low margin but high recurring consumption. So if you are doing everything right from order to delivery, you are actually converting that customer, which would in times to come show you a very healthy LTV matrix, right? Because
Fantastic.
these are the times when people also realize that which platform had the wherewithal to really fulfill what I intended that platform to fulfill, whether it is education, whether it is, I mean, we have seen Zoom as a classic case, right? So I think nothing extraordinary, pure common sense. Keep your eyes on your consumer behavior, keep your eye on the cohorts which are building up. That's that.
Brilliant, brilliant. I completely agree with the point that you mentioned about identifying the right cohorts, of course, going after them. While we are on the topic of engagement, I want to understand what would be the best engagement strategy right now for brands, because a lot of marketers are grappling with this. They do not want to be offensive right now, and they do not, of course, want to portray the brand in a bad light. So, how do we go about engagement
Sure,
now?
sure. So I think from creative standpoint, of course, these are the times where you can't afford to take a slapstick, sarky undertones or approach, which you could possibly take in a normal, you know, regime. These are the times when you got to be empathetic. These are the times when you got to touch the right chords. You don't want to really, make it too humorous because you don't know how a certain cohort will take it in what shape and form. So I think to that extent, the brands have to be really very, very clear that, what tonality, what is it that, what value prop you are trying to, commit to. And again, these are the times where you should not be overcommitting as well, right? Because under delivery in these times will hurt a lot more than in a new normal, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because we were talking to a couple of marketers earlier, and they mentioned that it is very, very important right now to make sure there is no uncertainty involved with the whole experience, because that is going to really affect the user in a bad way, especially in these times where he's very desperate. So I completely agree with your point, and I'm going to ask a different question now
Sure.
to you, which is about really assessing the long-term impact of COVID, and being in a business such as yours, where content of such content is very, very important to really move the mind share and really dominate social chatter as well. Do you think it's going to be a problem if the COVID impact really continues for a long period with respect to new content development? And if that does happen, is there a workaround for something like that?
Sure. So I think you asked a very pertinent question, right? So it is, of course, gonna impact for a new entrant or a new platform which doesn't have the length and breadth of either the shows or the movies or whichever format he or she is working on, right? So all the new launches, all the new, platform brands, they should surely, feel the pinch if they have not invested in building a library. But if you look at the latest data across almost all OTT platforms, right, you realize that virtually all of them in before they were hit by COVID, there was this big sentiment of content discovery, that how it's a pain, right? How there is so much to consume, and in a usual manner, people don't know what to consume. So I think next 2 or 3 quarters can easily go by for all of us where there is so much out in the open and so much yet to be consumed, right? No matter how much marketing money you spend, no much how big a TG pool that you had created, at any point of time, this notion that a show which had potential to reach, let's say, 10 million to 50 million people in a normal day has reached 10 or 50 million. That never happens, right? Because both from the consumer standpoint as well as from the marketer standpoint, there is so much more that your usual day occupied, that when there were normal times, you could not afford to invest, right? Effort and time, both. Today, because you have more hours at your disposal, you would possibly be looking at consuming a lot more, right? So in fact, on WhatsApp groups and on Twitter threads, you can actually see peer group and friends recommending to each other, hey, have you watched this? Hey, have you watched that, right? I mean, I have watched Amazon shows that I didn't know possibly existed on Amazon Prime, and amazing shows. And same, applies on Netflix, same applies on Alt, same applies on Eros, on D5 as well, right? So there is a lot of, content consumption which was waiting to happen. And today, because people have that extra time on their disposal, they're doing that, right? But you're right, if this extends beyond 2 to 3 quarters, I think there will be some consumer fatigue that will set in. And I think that is largely now how to address that. See, of course, if this continues, you can't shoot more shows. If you can't shoot more shows, you can't put more shows on the platform, right? So you got to sort of relook as to what more you can do in terms of user experience, in terms of consumer comms, in terms of your commercial pricing strategy. So I think it will be some total of all this rather than only the content, right? But again, you need to, from a platform standpoint, you need to look back and see, okay, if this goes for 2 to 3 quarters, how many shows I have, what TG I have already catered to, what TG is waiting to be catered to. And out of the TG that I've already carved out for that particular show, have I reached out to 100% of the TG? That is something, those are the questions that I would ask.
Awesome, awesome. I was talking to somebody from the online media space, and they told me about a very interesting initiative that they have done. They generally do a lot of these web shows. Of course, all of these web shows are shot professionally, and now they wanted to do something similar for a brand, and they decided to do a bootleg version where they have basically shot an entire show with the equipment that most of the actors have in their own
At
homes.
home.
So some of them have shot them via mobile phones, and it's pretty impressive. I think it might be the rise of the new bootleg media generation, but I don't really know.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, if you realize that there has been a global sort of movement on shooting new shows or new short form, content using only the mobile phone. Today, a mobile phone is capable of creating an experience that is worthy of basic consumption. Of course, high fidelity equipment in terms of sound and music could still be a challenge, right? But from a storytelling standpoint, right? But if a storyteller is smart and experienced, right, today you could do that, right? But is that something that will sustain all through? I have my doubts, right? Because again, and especially for platforms which are largely not free, right, which are premium SVOD or behind the paywall kind of consumption, there is already a set expectation of a certain fidelity, quality, right? And I think that is something which would always be in question, right?
It'd be hard to recreate, definitely.
Exactly, right. But there are certain stories which could still be told, and right. But then that depends on the nature of the story, the storyteller.
True.
As well.
True. Completely fair. Completely fair. Manav, there has been a lot of talk about the way brands need to engage, and of course, we have seen some really interesting examples of the way brands have been engaging as well with their TG right now. One thing is most definitely the dominant opinion is that radio silence from brands right now is not the best idea. It's actually a good time to engage. Uh, if I had to ask you to prioritize the top three things right now with respect to a communication strategy for a digital consumer brand, what would that be?
I think communicate only what you can deliver. That's one. Second, don't misrepresent, right? Three, your comms have to have a lot of empathy.
Fantastic.
Maybe a little bit humor, but don't go on the other side, right? And I think to that extent, also do remember, when you said that, it is not prudent to be silent, right? I think it is prudent to be silent if you don't have anything to communicate or anything to add, right? And certain categories which have been so severely hit, where the consumption has come to almost a standstill, right? There is no point spending the marketing dollars, right? If you are a premium luxury brand, there is no point for you to communicate if I cannot go and buy that product,
Yeah.
right? So you might as well save that dollar, go back to your drawing board, draw out your strategies that once this comes back to normal or whatever that new normal is, you might as well conserve that cash and then go back, right? So there's absolutely no harm, especially for those categories, those platforms and brands where the consumption is not happening right now. As much as they would want to do it, the nature of the quality or the state is such that it can't afford that consumption to happen. So yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Which brings us to the last segment, last couple of questions for you, Manav. Uh, a lot of people have been talking about this, about the effectiveness of working from home, and there have been a lot of different opinions about whether the future of work is remote for us or not. What do you think about this? Do you think we're headed towards a work from home future?
Oh, yeah. I think these times are certainly big eye openers. I think, especially the cities where a lot of man hours goes into travel. I think, and a lot of those businesses where the nature of the business is such where you're not required to be physically present with each other. I think those businesses should, do some soul searching. At the end of the day, real estate is a cost. At the end of the day, people spending time in traffic 2 hours one way is a cost, right? But of course, human interaction is irreplaceable. That remains the denominator. So you may choose to go to a situation where you could say 4 days a week you work from home, 2 days you come to office, right? We can do all those things. But yes, for sure, I think a lot of companies have already announced significant initiatives in this respect. So yeah, I am surely hoping that a lot of companies will, sort of adopt this new normal of WFH.
Awesome, awesome. Which brings me to the very last question. Of course, trying to get an opinion from everyone. What kind of an economic revival timeline do you foresee, Manav? Do you think it's going to be 6 months down the line, or it might be much worse, somewhere like 2 years or 3 years?
I don't think it is. I'm a hopelessly optimistic guy. Let me say that, right? And basis whatever is out in the open, I don't see more than 2 quarters, right? So 6 months is where we should be looking at a uptrend to start happening.
I hope that is completely true, completely fair. We are all rooting for that. Manav, thank you so much for your time. I'm done with my questions. I had a fantastic chat.
Thank you so much. Happy to be with you guys.
Awesome, awesome.